What does the church have to say about class warfare? The church has something to say about class warfare. Listen in on this episode of The Catholic Money Show.
Welcome back to our Rerum Novarum series. This is episode 2. If you're just joining us, you can tune into last week's episode to get our introduction scoop on this series, as well as exploring the first, 15 paragraphs. And this week we are now diving into paragraphs 16 through 30.
That's right. If you've got your copy of Rerum Novarum at home, Rerum Novarum, I'm raring.
Are you raring and ready to go?
Raring and I don't know. Anyway, I'm raring to go on Rerum Novarum. So we're gonna go through. So last time we talked about the first 15. So we're gonna continue on. We're looking at 16 through 30 today for those at home who want to follow along.
And just a little tiny preface, again, in case you missed the first episode and you're just kind of tuning into this one. Super quick recap. We're doing this series on Rerum Novarum because Pope Leo XIII wrote this in 1891. It was the first Catholic social teaching encyclical, and it was really a bombshell and kind of gave way to several other encyclicals echoing similar sentiments ever since then. And Pope Leo XIV, our now Holy Father, he drew his name off of inspiration from Pope Leo XIII's legacy, in part from Rerum Novarum. He's also mentioned it a couple of times, seeded it into some of his talks or the Wednesday audience, homilies he's given. And something else he's often commented on is artificial intelligence, AI. And how he believes that we're really connected to the time the church was in back in the Industrial Revolution when Rerum Novarum was written. And it was very much on workers' rights, and we're going to hear these themes in here. But we're now in another revolution. We're in the,
AI revolution.
Yeah. Artificial intelligence revolution. My brain is like, apparently can't form a sentence today. And so it's important to know what this document says, and I would not put it past Pope Leo XIV to give us another encyclical drawing off, again, the timeless wisdom the church received in Rerum Novarum.
I'll probably just have ChatGPT write it for him.
Maybe he will. We'll see.
The encyclical on AI written by AI. I wonder if it'll be pro AI.
Somebody should feed that in to the prompt, just to give it all the Rerum Novarum and then all the ones that have been written since then, and then tell it to write one on AI now in the modern world.
Yeah, we can.
I'm so curious what it would say.
If it's self-preservation features.
I don't know. Maybe it would actually fess up that this is dangerous and it needs to be destroyed immediately. Maybe it would.
I am going offline now.
Anyway. We are going to be diving into those next paragraphs. The first 15 paragraphs, I felt like to summarize them very broadly, was essentially the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIII, saying the church definitely should have a seat at the table in commenting about this. Conditions are abysmal, and the Lord hears the cry of people. And this is something now that a lot of people are dedicating a lot of energy to, and the church has something to say. So go ahead now and implement some of these suggestions that are coming down the line. I'd say that was the first 15.
Yeah, I think so.
Justifying why the church is supposed to and deserves to be an authority figure in this space.
Okay. Absolutely. So we'll continue on in. And so let's say 16 is maybe a bit of a bridge paragraph here. You could probably maybe make the case that we should have talked about it last week, though I think it's a nice one to start off with this week.
You're realizing, should have been last week.
No, I think it's helpful to pop back in. So he's talking about, hey, yes, me as Pope, it's my job to say something about this, the church's job to say something about this. And it says here about the middle of it, it says, doubtless, this most serious question demands the attention and the efforts of others besides ourselves, as in like the Pope ourselves, to wit, of the rulers of states, of employers of labor, of the wealthy, aye, of the working classes themselves, for whom we are pleading. But we affirm without hesitation that all the striving of men will be vain if they leave out the church, because of the unique place that the church holds in looking after the well-being and eternal well-being of all.
Yeah. And I would say that we're now shifting more into that eternal well-being conversation before we begin to get into the practicals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now he's beginning to make this shift towards, okay, so he's like, okay, the church, blah, 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 it can talk about this. This is why, this is, etc. Now, it can't just be the church doing anything about this, because we live with nations. So the state has some responsibilities. So we're going to begin the shift here towards talking about responsibilities of the state, though I don't think that really starts up in earnest until
A bit later.
about 40, it's where we're going to stop today. That's next episode. So today we're kind of making our way over there by talking about workers and laborers and owners and the relationship between us all.
Right. So, yes, the church works within societies, and so those who exercise authority within countries and states and cities and local areas do need to also do things in light of this, create just laws and conditions that support the dignity of all persons. Okay, so 17. 17 is pretty good. There's probably 4 or 5 paragraphs in this next section that we're going to review where they're just so good.
You just want to get
They're
the whole
bomb
thing
drops.
tattooed on your face.
They're just that good. But 17, what I really appreciate about it is essentially this idea. At the time, socialism was ramping up in popularity. Marxism, socialism, just this idea of we've got to get it out of the hands of those greedy, grubby, rich people, and we need to redistribute it to everybody else. And that it sounds good. It sounds like it's going to work out. It never does. A spoiler alert, here we are 100 and some years later, and we've seen several nations literally implode over this. And it did kind of the opposite of what was promised. But in paragraph 17, this is what the Holy Father said, that there naturally exist among mankind manifold differences of the most important kind. And he's basically starting to talk about class warfare because that was being seeded a lot at the time. And I would say it's still being seeded today. Oh my goodness. It really is. People differ in capacity, skill, health, strength, and unequal fortune, meaning not everybody is going to be a billionaire, or should anyone be a billionaire? That's a question for a different podcast episode. Not everyone's going to be a millionaire. Not everybody's going to have $100,000. Not everybody's going to have $10,000. Not everybody's going to have $1,000. If that makes sense. People differ in capacity, skill, health, strength, and unequal fortune is a necessary result of unequal condition. Such inequality is far from being disadvantageous. Did I say that right?
Advantageous, yeah.
Either to individuals or the community. Social and public life can only be maintained by means of various kinds of capacity for businesses and the playing of many parts. And each man, as a rule, chooses the part which suits his own peculiar domestic condition. Yeah. So essentially stating that just if we don't recognize that everybody is different, everybody is going to have different gifts, different ability, different capacity, different skills, and that is going to mean that we are going to earn different amounts of money in our world, in our societies, and our nations. That's just true.
And that it just all the different parts are going to work together too, right?
Yes, of
I
course.
appreciate very much. I appreciate music, but I'm not that good at playing any particular instrument. So I support the people who can play an instrument really well. So that's right. My lack, you could look at it as, is now working in concert with someone who has the thing that I don't have. And then we're working together. Their experience of their gift and their talent is enriched by me taking part in them performing, and my life is enriched by doing that as well. So and of course, copy and paste that, 6 billion times across the economy, across life, and all the different things where there's more of or less than in all of us. We're all made up differently.
Right. And there's going to be, seasons even of our own lives where we have an increased capacity and we might earn more versus other seasons. There might be times when our health is in a different place, and that's going to impact the work that we do and maybe even the wage that we earn. It's natural in our own lives to have these ebbs and flows. So imagine that then, again, multiplied out to an entire world. It's just natural that there's going to be, he doesn't say inequality. I feel like that's the buzzword today. He says inequality. It's just, it doesn't mean that everybody, that anybody's better than another. It's just not going to be the same, if that makes sense. And then he also goes on to say, as regards to bodily labor, even had man never fallen from the state of innocence, he would not have remained idle. But that which would have been his free choice and his delight became afterwards compulsory. So before the fall in the garden, Adam and Eve had work that they did. Now it was I don't even know how to imagine it because I'm only on the other side of the fall. But imagine the day at work when you feel like you're really contributing to something, things are growing, things are flourishing. They were probably, tending to the garden, building things, and it's conflict free and things are kind of moving forward. And
if you love what you do, you never work a day.
Right. It's that concept. And they really, it's just that everything's firing on all cylinders, etc. And it only became this compulsion and a thing to dread after the fall. It was never work itself that came with that. But the effects of sin are heavy and weighty, and he will talk about that a little bit more in the next paragraph, actually. Yes. So it's a good transition, but sometimes I just fail to recognize the effects of sin and the weight of it.
Yes, and 18 continues on. I mean, if you want to sum it up quickly, just there's going to be some pain and some hardship in your life, no matter what.
No money, doesn't matter.
Yeah, so don't listen to these people who delude the people and impose upon them, and their lying promises will only one day bring forth evils worse than the present. So just, hey, this isn't heaven. We're on the other. We're not on that side yet. It says there's nothing more useful than to look upon the world as it really is, and at the same time to seek elsewhere, as we've said, for the solace of its troubles. You're never going to have heaven on earth, because then it wouldn't be earth.
We're just pilgrims passing through. And I think sometimes the idea of socialism and some of the political ideologies that have risen out of that time is literally, let's use the law to design heaven on earth. And then it just kind of seems to always go sideways and off kilter. Especially, whenever you remove God from the equation, that's essentially where it goes. Every time. It's this thing that looks like it's going to work, and then it just is hollow. There's nothing there. And, he's calling that out. This is just deluding people. This is just lying and imposing on them that if they just follow this or they just hate that person and they just demand enough redistribution or whatnot, that is going to all of a sudden solve these miseries. But the consequences of sin are bitter and hard to bear. And we have to look towards heaven and just know that we can, and this is kind of a critique on modern times, but there's a whole genre of people out there that are like optimizers. They just think that if they optimize and tweak every part of their life, that they can kind of rid out suffering. You'll find people like this out there. Yeah. It's definitely kind of the underlying current of the day. If you could just get a little lifestyle design going for you, all of a sudden now all the pain, misery, and bitterness of life will just disappear. And if you could just control your thoughts enough, you'll never have a bad day again, etc. But it's really just no, there's going to be suffering, there's going to be pain. But as long as we know how to orient our minds towards our eternal destination, that's where our solace comes. That's where comfort comes, knowing that this is really just passing. All right, so 19.
19.
We're getting there. We're getting into the exciting ones. Your favorite one is coming. 19, he says, the great mistake made in regard to the matter now under consideration is to take up with the notion that class is naturally hostile to class, and that the wealthy and the working men are intended by nature to live in mutual conflict. So if you take God out of the equation, yeah, I could see how you'd naturally look at it this way. And I think people just play to this and they stir this up and they just want to cause so much division and anger and hatred and lies and stereotypes on both sides of that. And they're just manipulating people into this fight that doesn't necessarily have to be there.
Yeah, you hear, where we started off about in 17 talking about, it's going to be unequal. Things are, people have different talents, et cetera. They're probably going to end up with different amounts of money. That's just how it is. You might hear them think, oh, that's going to lead to all sorts of problems. The rich and the poor taking advantage of. And then he's just saying, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. That's not like the only setting we can live on. We can flip it to something else where we are working together. We understand that one needs the other.
That we have obligations to one another. And that we have rights and responsibilities. And that there's also another element of just, it's not our identity. We are more than that. And he's going to begin to tease that out a little bit more. About our real identity as sons and daughters of God. But that this is a false dichotomy. We don't have to get into this vision that the world is basically broken down into the haves and the have-nots. Is just some cooked up jargon that somebody came up with and fed out to people.
Or it might be, but they don't need to be against each other.
Sure.
The haves don't have to, people don't have to have the expense of have-nots and don't have to be against them and the other way around. Like they can work together. They can see each other, as it'll talk later, as true brothers. And we'll get to that then.
But he also points out that the church is really the only institution that has effectively drawn together the rich and the poor in a meaningful way where they were truly one. And he says that, first of all, there's no intermediary more powerful than religion, where the church is the interpreter and the guardian in drawing the rich and the working class together by reminding each of us of its duties to the other, and especially the obligations of justice. So the church has been the most effective communicator that draws the haves and the have-nots together because she articulates the truth that's transcendent beyond what amount of resources are entrusted to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
So going on into 20, and it says, of these duties, which we just talked about, it says, the following bind the proletarian and the worker, fully and faithfully to perform the work which has been freely and equitably agreed upon, never to injure the property nor to outrage the person of an employer, never to resort to violence in defending their own cause, nor to engage in riot or disorder, and to have nothing to do with men of evil principles who work upon the people with artful promises of great results and excite foolish hopes which usually end in useless regrets and grievous loss.
This whole paragraph probably deserves to be read.
It's it's quite marked up.
That first part, though, wow.
This is what if you work for somebody, you got to do the work fully and faithfully, which you've agreed to. You can't break their stuff or make them upset. And you can't resort to violence in defending your own cause or riot and disorder. And stay away from the troublemakers.
Yeah, the ones with evil principles who are working upon you. to kind of get their own thing, excite foolish hopes which end in regret and grievous loss. I mean, there's a lot of different things we've seen, civil unrest, at least in the United States over the last several years, that have just, they've resulted in useless regrets and grievous loss. Just stupid things that happened because people got inflamed and told to go do things that were probably against justice.
Yeah. Now you think, okay, well, we got the list for the workers. What about the owners? Oh, don't worry. That part of the paragraph is about 4 times as long. So it says here, the following duties bind the wealthy owner and the employer: not to look upon their work people as their bondsmen, but to respect in every man his dignity as a person ennobled by Christian character. They are reminded that according to natural reason and Christian philosophy, working for gain is creditable, not shameful, to a man, since it enables him to earn an honorable livelihood. But to misuse men as though they were things in pursuit of gain, or to value them solely for their physical powers, that is truly shameful and inhuman. Again, justice demands that in dealing with the working man, religion and the good of his soul must be kept in mind. Hence, the employer is bound to see that the worker has time for his religious duties, that he be not exposed to corrupting influences and dangerous occasions, and that he be not led away to neglect his home and family or to squander his earnings. Furthermore, the employer must never tax his workpeople beyond their strength, or to employ them in work unsuited to their sex and age. His great and principal duty is to give every one what is just. And of course, there's more. I stole the whole thing.
It's heavier. There's more, and I think that people sometimes fail to understand that to be given and steward much is actually just signing yourself up for even more stringent things that you will be judged on the final judgment day. Massive responsibility, souls entrusted to you, the livelihood of others, wealth that did it do good? Did it not just not go to evil things, but did it do enough good in the world that it was supposed to or could have? There's tremendous responsibility that is being communicated to the wealthy here. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked. And it, especially now in our time and day, the caricature of the wealthy person is them just sitting on the beach, flying around in their jet to their yacht and having a life of leisure. That will lead a wealthy person right into hell. Because, and he'll continue to get into that, but that's not being a good steward of wealth.
Sure.
But it's almost like painted as the aspiration. And of course that incites people to jealousy, because here they are toiling and working away for a paycheck, where this person is just, received an inheritance and is doing nothing. And I really liked that they pointed out that working for gain is creditable, not a shame to man, because I don't know, I don't know if I want to take this tangent, but it's not embarrassing to work. I do think, I really do think, maybe I'm just on the wrong TikTok algorithm, but sometimes you'll see these absolutely insufferable people who just were given an inheritance. They're literal trust fund babies, and then they get on there acting like they did something, and they're so smart and so savvy, when parents, grandparents, 6 generations back set the trust up, and they're just receiving a check every month, and they're so smart. They look down on people who work. They do. That I see these people online. So,
I mean, what's harder, sitting around screwing off, or like working your buns off? Driving a truck all around town, running in and out to everybody's doorstep, dropping packages. Like, that takes work.
It's hard.
That's way harder than just going off doing whatever you want. So yeah. That takes discipline. That takes effort.
Right. And sometimes we can start to hate that. And then we're enticed by the lie of, if I could just do X, Y, or Z and get passive income and never have to work again, That lie is so palpable nowadays. So palpable, and it's dangerous.
A couple other things I want to make sure we touch in 20. So it talks about, even before figuring out what the wages are, it says that owners and masters of labor should be mindful of this, that to exercise pressure upon the indigent and the destitute for the sake of gain, and to gather one's profit out of the need of another, is condemned by all laws, human and divine. To defraud anyone of wages that are his due is a great crime, which cries to the avenging anger of heaven. Can't mistreat people who are working for you. And it says, and this is important here for looking at in our way into 21, but it says, he's just kind of like throwing this out here after saying all this. He goes, were these precepts carefully obeyed and followed out, would they not be sufficient of themselves to keep under all strife and all its causes? Like, if you would just listen to me here and do this, wouldn't pretty much everything be fixed? And then, in our way into 21, he says, but the church, with Jesus Christ as her master and guide, aims higher still. Higher in just keeping out some strife and its causes.
Right. The things of earth cannot be understood or valued aright without taking into consideration the life to come, the life that will know no death. It's that seeing everything through a eternal perspective. Or our motto, it's being blocked by St. Joseph right now. Real success is ending up in heaven. That's been our motto.
Yeah.
Our motto here around Waltwin for several years now. We love it. It was your grandpa's motto.
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Grandpa Bailey. And it's fashioning that lens within ourselves that we see all things through eternity. All right, so he goes on and he says, he has given us this world as a place of exile and not as our abiding place. As for riches and the other things which men call good and desirable, whether we have them in abundance or are lacking in them, so far as eternal happiness is concerned, it makes no difference. The only important thing is to use them aright. Boom. We could do a whole course on just that sentence. And that at the end of the day, as Catholics, it doesn't matter how much we have or we don't have. It actually does not matter to God. The only thing he is going to ask us on Judgment Day is if we were good stewards of what we were given and if we handled them with virtue and not vice. That's it. And that goes for the person who really, never has much to their name, is paycheck to paycheck, but they're really diligent and prudent with it, to the person who is an employer and is a multimillionaire. In fact, I would argue that it's going to be harder for the multimillionaire to know they used it aright. It's just harder. As the numbers get bigger, it is harder to know that you used virtue instead of vice. So it really is trickier for those who have more because more will be asked of them.
Absolutely.
But really, at the end of the day, from an eternal perspective, let's just say it, because at least here in America, in the United States, we are very formed under kind of a Protestant work ethic, wealth ideology that says the more I have, the more I'm worth, the better I am, the more valuable I am to the kingdom. That's just not true. It's just a lie. All God cares about is if you were a good steward with what he entrusted to you. He gave you 1 talent, 2 talents, 5 talents. He expects you to double it. He expects a good return on what he gave back to you, what he gave to you. That's a conversation about prudence and virtuous application of money management. Sorry, my voice. That's tricky. That's hard. And a lot of people blow that off. And a lot of people that maybe don't have a lot of means are just kind of living for today. And they don't really think about that prudent application of good financial management. But we're all going to face Judgment Day. And that is going to be one of those things that gets looked at. Okay.
Yep. As it says in 22, let's continue.
You've been waiting for
Man,
this.
this is like one of my favorites.
You've been waiting for me to stop yapping. So you
I
22.
love it. All right. And again, this will be one that a lot gets read. Therefore, those whom fortune favors are warned that riches do not bring freedom from sorrow and are of no avail for eternal happiness, but rather are obstacles. That the rich should tremble at the threatenings of Jesus Christ, threatenings so unwanted in the mouth of our Lord that a most strict account must be given to the supreme judge for all we possess. The chief and most excellent rule for the right use of money is one the heathen philosophers hinted at, but which the church has traced out clearly, and is not only made known to men's minds, but is impressed upon their lives. It rests on the principle that it is one thing to have a right to the possession of money, and another to have a right to use money as one wills. So yes, private property is necessary, it's going on. Man should not consider his material possessions as his own, but common to all, so as to share them without hesitation when others are in need. Going on a little bit later, no one is commanded to distribute to others that which is required for his own needs and those of his household, nor even to give away what is reasonably required to keep up becomingly his condition in life, for no one ought to live other than becomingly. But when what necessity demands has been supplied, and one's standing fairly taken thought for, it becomes a duty to give to the indigent out of what remains over. And I will just end with this one last bit of it, a little bit further down. Whoever has received from the divine bounty a large share of temporal blessings, whether they be external and material or gifts of the mind, has received them for the purpose of using them for the perfecting of his own nature, and at the same time that he may employ them as the steward of God's providence for the benefit of others. He that hath a talent, said St. Gregory the Great, let him see that he hide it not. He that hath abundance, let him quicken himself to mercy and generosity. He that hath art and skill, let him do his best to share the use and the utility hereof with his neighbor. There's that.
Boom. I love that paragraph. You're right. You just basically read 70% of it. But it's so rich. There's so much good there. And again, I just think it's such a challenge to us. And it's something even that it really has shocked us as time's gone on. I'd say since we began While It Win over 8 years ago, I don't think we were as familiar with this paragraph or what it really implies in our life as we are now. And I think we might have said things that might have gone against this.
Oh, I'm sure I said some
just
dumb
from
stuff.
Ignorance and just not really understanding the church's stance on this, or even just the warnings of wealth that our Lord provides. Again, he's not saying that money is evil or money is bad, but he's saying that, okay, stop acting like this is going to bring you a better spot in heaven. Knock it off. Or that this is going to get rid of all the ills in your life. You know, you can hire a cleaning lady, you can hire a nanny, you can hire a chauffeur, you can literally have it all, and you're still going to have suffering. Okay? So stop thinking that you can just money yourself out of pain. Knock that off. And then just getting into there's on one equation having a right to money, but the right to use it as it wills, that kind of hinges on having virtue.
Yes.
And freedom and self-possession, to not be possessed by money and have it being the one calling the shots, but you centered in your relationship with our Lord, eyes fixed on heaven, discerning with him how you are to use the finances entrusted to you. What is becoming for the needs of your household? What is reasonable for your condition in life? Thinking about those things, that gives us the right to use money as we will. Taking those things into consideration.
Like you can't, and that would show, kind of going back to some of the, everybody's situation's unique thing. Like you can't have a rule to say, no one can ever morally spend more than $12,000 on a car. Because what about the family with 8 kids who needs to buy some big old van? Like, they are a lot more expensive than you might think.
Yeah, they really are. I've been kind of peeking around.
But now, right, this single person, who's just moving themselves around town, yeah, they can make that work for sure. Mm-hmm. But we can't apply the one standard across the board to everyone. There needs to be discernment. There is that unequality to think about.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a great example. And I remember I read Happy Are You Poor recently. I just kind of was refreshing myself on it by Father Thomas Dubay. And he even gives an example. He talks about one of our saints. I completely forget who it was. Sorry. She was part of the nobility class in France or England, somewhere, but she was in that upper echelon of people. And so she had to kind of parade around. She had to go to the balls, the banquets.
Wear fancy dresses.
And, and that just was part of her life and where she was born into that. And it was just where God put her. Mm-hmm. And he didn't call her to give up everything and go into the convent. Or he called her to stay where she was. And she would just put a hair shirt on under the nice gown.
It's just that easy. Just get a hair shirt, guys. Just get a hair shirt.
But what he was trying to poke at and touch on is that as Catholics, we should always just be looking at how to detach ourselves a little bit more, because sometimes our circumstances of life, where God has us, etc., there could be a lot of comforts and a lot of things, and we need to kind of choose that we're going to put a little bit of penance in here. We're going to make sure we don't get a little too comfortable, a little too attached here. And so that's going to look different. It's just going to look different with all of us. And so, yeah, it was completely fine that maybe she put on this gown that probably cost a ton of money, but she was putting an element of penance between her and it, drawing a level of detachment out of it, separating herself from this defining her, if that makes sense. And I think we all have a responsibility to kind of do that with a lot of the possessions in our life, to just always make sure this old bag of bones, what Brother asks, as St. Thomas Aquinas refers to the body, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. It's going to always be trying to draw up game plans to get out of penance, it wants me to go the soft route. And not that we have to abuse ourselves, but we just have to be aware and always looking for adding an element of detachment.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, condition in life. So this paragraph does not mean you need to give everything away. I guess that's the point I was trying to make there. Mm-hmm. It's, you really do need to take into account where does the Lord have you? Some people he's going to call to leave that state in life that they were in to go do something radically different, become a missionary, become a religious sister or a priest. Mm-hmm. But most of us are probably going to be right where God plants us.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to live our missionary life in the kingdom. And so what is becomingly to kind of that place, that's up to your discernment.
Mm-hmm. If I may, one more example.
Go.
And then we'll move on. We have more and nicer tech equipment than probably the average family. We have a nicer camera. We've got multiple microphones, lights, etc., in order to create this podcast and the other resources that we do. But it's nothing in comparison to what somebody who's a filmmaker, even a small-time filmographer, videographer would use in their line of work. And if we had what they had, definite overkill.
Sure.
Definite overextension, overconsumption.
Overinvestment into the tech.
Yeah. And so again, it's what's the right level for you? That's what that becomingly is, right? It should be good. Mm-hmm. Doesn't need to be the absolute best. It should be good.
Much to your chagrin. Sometimes.
Hey, man.
Well, usually you find what would be the ideal thing, and then you'll try to find it gently used.
Yeah, but
that's,
I'm
again,
saying
another little form of detachment.
Our now, since they raised the price, whatever it is now, like $800 camera, again, is not. I should not go out and buy the $50,000 camera that someone is using to make a movie.
No, you should not.
But I'm glad they do, because they need it for their work.
They do, and we then enjoy that movie.
Exactly.
All right. I think you read all the things from
Yeah.
that one, right?
22 is good.
Okay. I'm not even sure what I wrote there in the
The
comments.
poor, it says. 23 is an
the
easy one,
poor.
I think.
22 is like, all right, the rich.
Yeah.
Here again.
You've got
I'm going to
stuff.
say some hard
Those
stuff.
whom fortune favors.
Yes.
Let me tell you.
The next one, it's just the smallest paragraph. And again, that's right. For those who possess not the gifts of fortune, they are taught by the church in God's sight poverty is no disgrace, that there is nothing to be ashamed of in earning their bread by labor. Again, there is nothing wrong with working.
Jesus himself, it says, worked. He not only learned the trade of carpentry, he lived as a carpenter. He worked as a carpenter for the majority of his life to provide for him and Mary.
He was a craftsman. And again, it is telling that our Lord, when he came through the incarnation into our world, the circumstances into which he inserted himself, the family in which he chose to come into, was truly the most humble of circumstances. And I love that. And so I think that the poor should feel a special affinity from our Lord, that he literally took all the barriers out. And he wanted to be as close to the brokenhearted, to those impoverished, to know that he walked in that same situation and that he sees you in it, and that there's nothing wrong with working for one's bread.
Not only does he see you in it, but others see him in it. And he's right there as part of it.
Mm-hmm. Although even the poor, those working a job, laboring, nowadays it includes not only those who maybe would be like the working poor, but I'd say an overwhelming majority of people do need to work in order to eat.
Yes.
An overwhelming majority, maybe the 99%. It's just like
whatever it might be.
But I would say these calls to the rich do apply to a good amount of people too, even though they're working, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I think it's
The
almost
working
like
wealthy.
there's
It was a different time.
yeah, I think it's this interesting thing because there's the big, like conglomerate owner, and then all the toilsome laborers. And that was, the large part of how the industrial things worked out, right? The factory workers, the factory owner. But now, there's so much. I'd say
the rise of
I'd
kind of
say
a lot of
both
professions.
parts have grown, and maybe for some there's even some overlap, where sometimes you are the wealthy, and sometimes you are the one who needs to be looked after.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the middle class, really. Because especially with inflation, etc.
Yeah.
As families grow.
So that right. So 23 is hey. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Those who get their bread by labor. And then he kind of comes back in 24 and talks about, hey, it all lies in virtue. It's not what we have. It's virtue. And the good news is that anyone can be virtuous. Whether you're high or low, rich or poor, virtue will bring everlasting happiness. Mm-hmm. It says, these... God himself seems to incline rather to those who suffer misfortune, for Jesus Christ calls the poor blessed. He lovingly invites those in labor and grief to come to him for solace, and he displays the tenderest charity toward the lowly and oppressed. These reflections cannot fail to keep down the pride of the well-to-do and to give heart to the unfortunate, to move the former to be generous and the latter to be moderate in their desires. Thus, the separation which pride would set up tends to disappear, nor will it be difficult to make rich and poor join hands in friendly concord.
A lot of good words.
It's all virtue.
Yeah, moral qualities are really more important than how much money you have in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Are you rich in virtue? You want to be very poor in vice. Mm-hmm. That's really the only thing that matters.
Yeah. And it flows right into 25, where it's like, if you're doing this, classes will not only be united in the bonds of friendship, but also in those of brotherly love.
Yeah, and he starts to begin talking about that and how he even goes back to, and this might be touching on later paragraphs, but that in Christ, we really are all one. And if we understand our identity and the church, and she is our home, she is our mother, and we're united. And then there's even callbacks to the early church and how they were just one. There's just no better way to put it. And I think this, I don't want to skip ahead too much, but we see it in the book of Acts, how those who had more than they needed would sell it off and take care of the needs of the poor. They would take care of the widows. They would take care of those whose maybe their family abandoned them because they became a Christian. They took care of each other, and they just knew that that was part of the community, and it was part of their culture. And nobody then was pointing fingers and having a big fight. They just kind of viewed themselves as family. And only in the church does that happen, because we have that shared identity in Christ, and it's kind of an overflow of that love for him and then love for each other. You can't really legally mandate that in a way that's going to express itself well.
Yeah.
It's not going to ever replicate what we saw in the book of Acts with the early church and what we still see going on with the church in the world today.
I'd say 26 goes into some of that as well. I mean, he does these little, wouldn't this be, blah, blah. You know, right? He ends 25 with that kind of that rhetorical question again. Would it not seem that were society penetrated with ideas like these, strife must quickly cease? And he goes, but the church, not just content with pointing out the remedy, we also do it.
We eat our own dog food.
We serve it up for all of you. But he is just going on saying, you know, like, the church uses all the tools available to her to help as many as are willing to live virtue, and to as it says, the tools of the church alone can reach the innermost heart and conscience and bring men to act from a motive of duty, to control their passions and appetites, to love God and their fellow man with a love that is outstanding and of the highest degree, and to break down courageously every barrier which blocks the way to virtue.
Boom. And I'd say, yeah, a lot of the rest of these paragraphs, they're pretty similar. And they're really, 27 begins that, you know, civil society was renovated in every part by Christian institutions. When we say that the West was made by Christianity and Christian civilizations, it's just true.
Yeah, Western civilization as we know it
Yes, as
owes its existence to Christianity, to the church.
And a lot of these ideals and aspirations that countries have and hold, they only hold them because Christians held them up as aspirations because of our faith. And he goes on to say that in the strength of that renewal, the human race was lifted up to better things, nay, that it was brought back to death, from death to life, and to so excellent a life that nothing more perfect had ever been known before or will come to be known in the ages that have yet to be. So there's kind of this urging to return back to morality, turn back to virtue. And if human society is to be healed now, in no other way can it be healed save a return to the Christian life and Christian institutions. When a society is perishing, the wholesome advice to give to those who would restore it is to call to the principles from which it sprang, from the purpose and perfection of an association that is to aim and attain for that which it is formed, and its effort should be put in motion and inspired by the end and object which originally gave it being. There's this urging and this call of kind of like, stop thinking you've evolved past the church and morality. He's calling out woke before woke was woke.
Yeah, before woke even went to sleep to get woken up.
He really is. It's like, they're trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Do I have the right?
Yeah, I
wait,
think that
wait.
kinda
What's
works.
the analogy there?
Yeah, that works.
Or they're trying to throw the
Bath that water
bath
out
water out with the baby.
I don't know.
Sometimes analogies
They're
get messed
throwing out
up
the wrong things.
in my brain, but there's this idea that, yeah, if we can just kick the church out and tweak some things, we can have a perfect civilization or society. But really, and somehow still achieve those things that we used to hold dear. It's illogical. The thing which gave birth to these ideals, morals, you can't get rid of it and then expect you're going to get the same results. That's crazy.
Now, and I would say he's not arguing for some sort of a, like, church takeover of the government or anything.
No.
It's just a call to that the hearts of men must be converted to Christ. And through this, and through folks and us ourselves living out our faith, living the way we should, that will transform the society and, bring things about. It's not that, we don't need to, legislate Christianity into the hearts of all. No, it needs to be proposed to the hearts of all and evangelized. So then going into 28, just talking about, yes, Christian morality, when adequately and completely practiced, leads of itself to temporal prosperity, for it merits the blessing of that God who is the source of all blessings. Yes. It powerfully restrains the greed of possession and the thirst of pleasure, twin plagues, which too often make a man who is void of self-restraint miserable in the midst of abundance. It, Christian morality, makes men supply for the lack of means through economy, teaching them to be content with frugal living, and further, keeping them out of the reach of those vices which devour not small incomes merely, but large fortunes, and dissipate many a goodly inheritance.
Ooh, twin plagues.
There it is. That's the twin snakes. Right there. Neither one is sweet. They're both sour.
That's a candy for those of you
If
who
you
don't
know, you know. And if you
you
don't,
know.
go to the candy aisle and get some Haribo. Twin
So essentially, yeah, if Christian morality is not proposed and taught and upheld as the way in which to interact with our resources, we're just going to be left to our own devices, and the greed of possession and the thirst for pleasure will rot us out. Pope Leo XIII, I think we've just saw 100 years of getting rotted out. Because God is widely been rejected.
Yeah, there's so many calls against Christian morality and the morality police and all this stuff. And maybe so there's some puritanical leanings in all those camps that are getting criticized. But it's not just we want to keep people in check. They want to keep people down, keep people from being happy. No, we want to keep people from falling under the greed of possession and the thirst of pleasure. These plagues. We don't want people to be miserable.
Yeah.
That's what morality is about. But let's go on.
Let's go on. 29. The church, moreover, intervenes directly in behalf of the poor by setting on foot and maintaining many associations which she knows to be efficient for the relief of poverty. I still think the church is doing more for the poor in the world than probably any other institution.
Oh, this is where you're talking about the early church.
Yes. And this has been, because Christians, we see it as a moral imperative to take care of those in need, especially those entrusted to our care. Those are our brethren, our brothers and sisters. And I would say, this happens even in the church at large, but it happens, we see it in Acts, right, where we saw this happen amongst the small churches. I think we see it even in our parishes. Our parishes are just a mix of all different people with all different ages, with all different educations, with varying income. And even at our own church, I know that there are plenty of resources that are there for those who fall into hard times. And so that's happening at our church. I think it's happening probably at every church. There's always people that want to be generous and help take care of other parishioners, even if they don't know each other, just because they feel completely bonded to them in Christian charity as brothers and sisters in the Lord. And the church continues to be the most charitable organization on earth because we see it as an obligation and we don't need anybody to legislate that. It's just what we're called to do by God, by our vocation as his disciples. And so, it says in Acts that neither was there anyone needy among them. So it didn't say that they took all their houses and lands and whatever and sold them and then made sure everybody had the same amount of money. It just made sure that nobody was in need. Everybody had a roof. Everybody had food. Everybody had a way to make a living. Everybody had some clothes. People had what they needed. And I think that's beautiful. They had that responsibility to each other.
And it talks about this is how, the church has come to do this. The church has started all these things. You have these, religious orders and all these folks who take care of those in need. And then talking about this need of kind of moving on, right? It says, some folks, at the present day, many there are who, like the heathen of old, seek to blame and condemn the church for such imminent charity. They would substitute in its stead a system of relief organized by the state. But no human expedients will ever make up for the devotedness and self-sacrifice of Christian charity. Charity as a virtue pertains to the church, for virtue it is not, unless it be drawn from the most sacred heart of Jesus Christ. And whoever turns his back on the church cannot be near to Christ. It's like you just can't replace it. We can't just get rid of everything, have the state do it. And then, this is this little turn now. And in this next episode in the series, we'll be going through sections or paragraphs 31 to 42, which I think talk about the role of the state.
What are the state's obligations and responsibilities and rights? We just talked about the obligation of the worker and that of the wealthy or the employer. Now it's time to talk about the state. What's their role in this? Okay. I love that last part. Yeah, I've heard people try to argue that Mother Teresa was a horrible person because she took care of the poor and the state could have done it better. Anyway, it's just craziness.
The state that wasn't doing it.
How could you ever say that? That's just crazy. All right, I'm excited to get into the state next time. If you have questions, please email us, email@walletwin.com. And if you are enjoying this, would you please share it with a Catholic friend who you think would also enjoy and nerd out on going through Rerum Novarum? That would be a blessing to us. And then if you haven't rated our podcast, would you do that? We tend to not ask for ratings very often, and we should, because when you give a rating and even leave a review of our podcast, it juices the algorithm and it helps other people that would enjoy the show find the show.
If you haven't left a 5-star rating of our podcast,
and a
would you please do
rave review talking about how this is the best podcast you've ever listened to, go ahead and leave that now.
Yeah.
Please and thank you.
An Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen. If you can rate it, please do, and maybe all the way. You can join us next time. You can do a little homework if you like. Grab a copy of Rerum Novarum and go through paragraphs 31 to 42. That's where we'll be talking about the role of the state.
Until next time.
Bye for now.